jacketed system has become much worse. It exists not just in IIT, but it also exists now in the liberal arts system, in the humanities and social sciences. We just created a whole new exam. And in that exam, you have to choose, you are awarded. You do specify your preference, but the computer basically looks at your rank in the exam and decides what you can get.
Welcome to the Indianness podcast, where we explore the journeys of remarkable Indians and individuals from the global Indian diaspora. I'm your host, Sanjay Puri, and today we have the privilege of speaking with Dr. Pramath Raj Sinha, a visionary leader in education and entrepreneurship. Dr. Sinha is the founder and trustee of Ashoka University. He's the founding dean of the Indian School of Business, ISB, founder of Harappa, and now the president of the edtech company upGrad. His contributions to reshaping higher education in India and beyond have been truly transformative. Dr. Sinha, thank you so much for joining us on the Indianness podcast.
Thank you so much, Sanjay. It's a privilege to be here. You have a very popular podcast, and so I'm honored to be invited.
Well, it's our privilege too. Dr. Sinha, we have a global audience, as I mentioned to you before. Purpose is for us to really find out about your journey so that it serves as a tool for learning. We call it a learning moment, also an inspirational moment. So in order for us to do that, we would love to start right from the beginning. So can you take our listeners to where were you born? And then talk a little bit about your parents, and then we'll go further deeper into it.
Sure, thank you. I was born in Patna, in Bihar, the state of Bihar in India, and I spent the first 18 years of my life there. I still have a home there, so I would say that it's still home for me. My parents were also from Bihar, and had moved to Patna over the years as their parents moved out of the rural hinterlands and moved into the big city. I had I have three sisters, and we'll talk about them later. But my father wore multiple hats. One of them was that he was a writer. He wrote prolifically in Hindi and is a Hindi writer and literature. And my grandfather, too, was a well-known Hindi writer. So they both came from a literary background in Hindi. But my father also ran a printing press and had a small publishing business, which was how he made ends meet from a financial standpoint. And of course, he was very involved in philanthropy in general, as were people of that generation. My mother was a homemaker, but she was also very involved in philanthropy and also in supporting my father's literary pursuits. So that's a quick story about my parents. They made sure that I got a great school education. So I went to the local Jesuit school in Patna. Interestingly, I had a school principal who really was very inspiring. I've often wondered later on in life what made him a great leader, a term that I only truly understood much later in life. But he was a remarkable man. He ran the school well, of course, but he also took a lot of personal interest in all our lives, and in a small way, changed the trajectory of every one of us as students in that school. And it was a special school in that we all stuck together as friends from that school, particularly my class. And if I may say so without blowing too much of my own trumpet, my classmates have done extremely well with their careers in their lives. And so it was truly, looking back, a very remarkable and unique experience that I got, that I know that a lot of other people would not have received, even if they were in better environments than living in a remote state and in Patna. So I was very lucky to have experienced that in that time period of my life.
Pramath, a lot of things to unpack there, if I may dig deep into a couple of points. First point I want to touch on, and then I'll come to others. You talked about this principle and you touched on a topic which is very important, leadership. Leadership comes in many different shapes or forms. And you said he touched many lives. For our listeners, just elaborate, because many times we don't reflect on the influences that made us who they are. So how was he? Because there must have been a lot of students. You were not the only student in that school, but he touched you, and you still remember after many years. We won't say how many years, but many years. So I want our listeners to know, how did he achieve that from a leadership standpoint, from touching you, etc.?
Sanjay, I don't know if he touched every student, but it is also true that he touched many students.
Okay.
Well, obviously, in running the school well, hiring good teachers, taking interest in making sure that the school was a high-performing school in terms of what people would expect from a school. I think he did a great job, and so indirectly he helped many people. But there I want to recount one instance which I learned many years later in life from one of my school teachers, who I still remain in touch with. In fact, on Friday, I'm participating in a conference that she's organizing. She was my first, we were her first class in grade 9. She was an English teacher. And Father Harlan had brought her into the school. And she tells the story of how one day when she got very frustrated with us, we were an all-boys school, 9th grade, rowdy, testing her ability to teach us. And she was teaching Shakespeare, which is not an easy subject. She went back to the principal and said, listen, I'm really frustrated and I don't think I'm cut out for this job. And she said that he told her something that has stayed with her and then stayed with me, because now I'm involved with students and with building institutions. And so he continues to pass on lessons to me even so many years after he's dead and gone. He told her that the key to being in charge of your classroom or in charge of your school is to make sure that your students are happy. Now, that's a very profound statement to make when you think about it. Obviously, he was not talking about fun happy, pleasure happy, entertainment happy. He was talking about happy in terms of fulfillment, in terms of learning, growth, engagement. And that's so powerful. Today, when parents come to me at Ashoka or ISB or any of the institutions I'm involved in and say, we are very happy with our son's education, our daughter's experience, I always remember that. And it's also extremely significant because not many people in India particularly are happy with the education they are getting or the institution they are going to. So that's just one example of how he affected everyone. But if I may take a minute and also talk about how he affected individuals or impacted individuals. I can tell you my story, but I can share two stories of my friends who later on told me in life. One friend told me that he used to play the mouth organ. And once Father Harlan went to Germany, and when he came back, he called him to his office and presented him a mouth organ. That was this very special mouth organ that was made by this particular guy in Germany, which was rare and difficult to get. And Father Harlan had got that mouth organ for him. And he was completely blown away that he knew about this famous mouth organ maker and had bought that mouth organ and brought it for him. And, you know, this friend was a shy guy. He did not participate in competitions and so on. But that mouth organ completely changed his life. And he still remembers that story. I have another story of a Another friend of mine who I'm actually still working with, he actually heads one of the universities. He's a big painter and has built a bit of a name for himself as a painter, even though he's an academic. And he tells the story of how Father Harlan called his father and said that, we have to send your son to get trained by so-and-so because I see in him amazing potential to paint, and encouraged him to participate in several competitions and made sure that he went. What he did with me once was that I was giving a speech in elocution, which was a very famous speech by Jawaharlal Nehru at the birth of India's independence. It's a very well-known speech. It's very powerful, very emotional, very inspirational. And in the local competition at the school, I won the gold medal. And not surprisingly, because I was half decent at doing the elocution, but the speech is so powerful that anybody would melt, right? Because I won, I was then asked to represent the school in an inter-school competition where the stakes were much higher. Father Harlan made me change that speech. And I was really resistant. I didn't like it. I felt like, he was making things more difficult. I had this thing sewn up. I could have won it hands down. And he said, no, this is a Me Too speech. That's not the language he used, but, I'm using it. That is a common speech. You have to attempt something harder and demonstrate that. And you are capable of that. And that lesson has always stayed with me. I was kicking and screaming. And it was a very difficult speech. And I had to learn it again. And I was not sure. But it's one of my proudest moments in my life. And by the way, I got the silver medal, not even the gold medal. But teaching me to not settle is a huge lesson that he has taught me. That, you can always do more. Take on the harder task. The easy task, everybody will do. The common task, everybody will do. What is distinctive about you? How are you leaving your mark? People say, what is your USP, right? So that lesson, and so this is the kind of impact this man had. And he was also very sensitive and empathetic. I was slated to become the school student council president. I'm not going to tell you the whole story, but one thing led to the other. And while I was very smug that I was going to win, I actually lost the election by a wide margin. Okay. Now, he felt so bad for me that he called me aside before the announcement. And he said that, I'm going to cancel all the grade 9 votes. So when he first told me that, I thought he was doing that to favor me and to make me win. So that if you take the grade 9 votes, I would be able to win. So I immediately started protesting. And he said, no, I want you to know that even if I take the grade 9 votes out, you're not going to win. You're actually still losing. But the way the grade 9 guys have voted, they have en masse voted for the other candidate. And it cannot be. So there's obviously something going on, which is a herd mentality. They have not really exercised their thinking. So I'm canceling their vote on principle. And while I empathize with you, I'm not doing this to help you, but I want you to understand that, in the future, don't take things for granted. So these were very powerful lessons in a moment of failure, sensitively bringing home the learning to you is an art that I have learned from people like him in my life. And I think that's how they change lives. And leadership to me is about changing people's lives. Of course, it's about delivering results, which is where he ran a great school and made a happy school. But as he was delivering these results, he was also inspiring people to be their best. And we all sing praises of him even today. God bless him. He passed away many years ago in Chicago from cancer, left a relatively young age. But even this English teacher that I mentioned to you, she went on to then teach in Delhi, became the principal of a school, then founded a whole school called Sanskriti School, which is one of the most famous schools in Delhi, was awarded the Padma Shri Award. She's in her late 70s, but continues to work very hard with students. again, she will tell you that she was really inspired by Father Harlan, because in that moment when he told her, all you have to do is keep your students happy, that's what she did as school principal of the leadership positions that she had in school. So yeah, a long story, but that's the impact this one human being had on many, many generations of students that came out of the school during that time.
Wow. I'd love to have had Father Harland on our podcast, but just to quickly summarize, Pramath, because this applies to so many settings. When you say keep your students happy, it could have be the case with keep your employees happy. It could be the case with your keep your family happy. And as you said, happy doesn't mean give them entertainment or keep paying them more money. It means many, many different things, and that's a big lesson. Again, part of our podcast is lessons learned. So that was one of the things. The other thing which I thought was fantastic was don't take the easy way out. You could have taken the Jawaharlal Nehru speech and had you could have just walked it in and won the gold medal, but he wanted you to strive for getting out of your comfort zone. So what I think you are saying is sometimes you need to get out of your comfort zone. Maybe you might not win the gold medal, but believe me, it'll teach you to deal with adversity and challenges even better the next time it comes around. And then also you talked about his emotional quotient. When he talked about when you were not winning, he had that empathy and he understood that sometimes, as they say, the EQ is sometimes more important than the IQ as far as you're dealing with your employees, your colleagues, your family, etc. So those are just incredible learnings. As I said, they can come from so many people around, and you were really lucky to have Father Harlan, God bless his soul, really for doing that. And thank you for sharing that with our listeners and especially also with me. Pramath, let's talk a little bit about your childhood. Can you just, dad was obviously, and we can see some of this literary bent that you have. He was a writer, he was a publisher. Mom was, I call them family makers, not homemakers. They make, they're the foundation of our family. She made the family because she sacrificed to do that. How was, you had three sisters, just very briefly talk about the environment from studies, sports, friends. Just give us a summary. I want to, for our audience, figure out what have been the influences for you.
Yeah. So I think two or three things I would say with those different cast of characters, if you will, who were there in my life growing up. I think one was that there was unconditional support. So while there were obviously times when I would goof up or get scolded or be in the dark, despite all those, which is part of anyone's upbringing or life, I think the fact that my parents created a very secure environment for me to grow up, and my sisters also, was something that I feel very lucky and grateful for. I have seen, I've not to compare, but I do have, we all see how others live their lives and so on. And I think even though we had decent means, I was not spoiled. I was treated normally. And I think that was a huge thing, being the youngest son of the three daughters. I could have been very spoiled. They brought me up in a very secure, but a very matter of fact kind of environment. The one thing that I really treasure, though, is that for some reason, my dad would give me all kinds of errands. He would make me do errands. He would go from going to drop people off at the airport, to pick people up from the train station, to buy tickets, to do work in the bank, to go to the post office, to make arrangements for my sister's weddings, for parties, for his literary events, whether it was ordering food, making arrangements for chairs and tables, and cars, and picking up people. I just grew up doing all of these things and learned to just enjoy them. I learned the joy of execution, and also faced a lot of problems. So I think became a problem solver of real things rather than just sort of academic or a problem solver. So that was the biggest gift I got from my dad. Looking back, at that time, sometimes I used to even resent it and think that he's being lazy, and this is child labor. So why should I do this? But when I look back, I do think that had a profound impact on my ability to get stuff done. Sometimes I joke with people that, building an institution to me is like organizing my sister's wedding events, right? Feels like that to me inside my head. I think if I look at my sisters, I think the fact that they had very committed careers post their education, and they all worked hard for it with very little input or support, has been a great role model for me. My first oldest was the first ever woman police officer from Bihar, and the number 5th in India ever. That was extremely inspirational. And in her case, that happened after her first marriage ended in a divorce, which was a very big thing in the family. And it was a big social stigma in those days, which we had to deal with. And the struggles of, going through the legal battles and so on as a conservative family, her second marriage, and so on. So that whole incident completely changed my family's outlook towards women and making them financially independent, giving them career support. And then I benefited from seeing their careers take off. And that became like, hey, I have to be at least as good as them. In the family, you start to compare. So I think that served as a huge motivation and inspiration for me, and continues to. We are all much older, but I think what they've done with their lives has been a source of huge inspiration. And I think the other last thing I would say is that those were relatively simpler, modest times. So, I used to go and play cricket every day with my chauffeur's son, the local meat shop owner's children. We never thought about caste, religion, social standing, rich, poor. We were all just there, and it didn't matter at all. And I think that really did build a very liberal mindset from an early age. And I don't mean the liberal in the political term, but just the acceptance of differences and looking beyond differences. My parents also did institute another very strong value in me of deep respect for people. And I know, being on the inside, that they disliked certain people, or they had conflict with certain people, or certain people actually took advantage of them and defrauded them. And as you know, it happens in everybody's lives. But their strong commitment to saying that we have to always respect another human being, regardless of what problem we may have with them, has something that has really stayed with me. I think it has helped me in my career, in business, in non-profits, because, and it has also helped me deal with conflict better. It has helped me deal with firing people better, because even in asking somebody to leave your organization, you can be still respectful to them. And that was another valuable lesson that I think I learned in that milieu growing up.
So, as you've done, there are several inspirational lessons here. One question I have, if it's okay with you, if I may ask you, you talked about the inspirational story about your sister becoming the first police officer in Bihar, the fifth in India. But before that, there was some trauma that happened with her divorce at that time. As you mentioned, it was not done. Did that, and it changed the outlook of the family towards financial independence, that women need to be financially independent. How old were you at that time, Pramath, when this happened?
So my sister's marriage took place in 1971, so I can give away my age. I was 7 years old, and then this whole unraveling of a marriage and this whole period started about a couple of years later, or soon after that, and went on for a good 7-8 years. So I think all the way through my teens, there was a lot of, literally a lot of drama.
Did that impact you when you look back in some shape or form? How did it impact you?
Well, I think one thing that I was deeply impacted by was how social norms can really get in the way of what is the right thing for a human being. So, for example, a lot of my relatives were like, oh, we have to make her go back. But it was very clear that she was being tortured, and there was no way that the marriage had a future. But there was a whole family group and elders, respected people giving advice, right? Because there's just no way you can actually have somebody. So that was one thing that has stayed with me, and so I don't consider myself a big rebel or an activist, but I do feel that I always question some norms which are actually harming the case of people's personal well-being. So that's one thing that has stayed with me. The other thing that has stayed with me is that sometimes people should mind their own business. So while we have this notion of this family in India and community in India, that's also extremely suffocating and debilitating. If my father had not stood up and said that I'm not going to let my daughter go back, everybody who was advising us, who actually didn't really care about her one way or the other, was actually giving us the wrong advice when I look back on it. So the one thing that I've also learned is that when giving advice or taking advice, you really have to just think about where you are coming from or where somebody is coming from, because you may have no idea of the other person's context. And you are sort of dishing out homilies as if you know what you're talking about. Most people had probably not had their daughters or their sisters or their cousins go through something like this. So what was their authority or credibility to give advice in the first place? They should have minded their own business. So I think that was something that I was struck by as a small kid. But yes, I was also struck by my father's courage. I think initially he gave in to the pressure from the rest of the family, the elders, looking up to the elders to almost instruct him on what he should do, to one day saying, to hell with this, this is not right, and I'm going to fight this. And I have to say that was also very inspirational. And then to see my sister completely go from being a very demure, traditional woman who was brought up to be a good wife, to being this still demure and soft woman, but a strong police officer who has had an illustrious career. These transformation stories were also positive in a time of, yes, unhappiness. And like I said, I almost want to say that, it was trauma, but in retrospect, we all came out much better. If you look at the trajectory of all our lives and our family and the lessons that we've taken from that incident.
Well, I think a couple of things that you mentioned, especially for our audiences, when you get advice, just make sure that they understand the context of your situation, because they might be speaking from their context, and context is very, very important. And the other thing you said, community, family is all great, but sometimes it can be a little suffocating, Pramath. Pramath, talking, and obviously the one other thing, very important thing is your dad is truly inspirational, because standing up at that time against societal pressures when it's coming at you from all sides is very hard, and he did stand up. So we see some of that in you also, in the leadership skills, in the values that you have imbibed. And you talked a little bit about how treating others has been a key thing. Talk a little bit about your academics. Which school you went to? The Jesuit school. Besides obviously being great at elocution and debating and stuff, how were you in studies, Pramath? I mean, you enjoyed cricket, but
No, I was not a sports person. No.
You were not, but okay. But how were you in studies at that time? Just very briefly.
No, I think I was pretty good. I never came first in class, but I was in the top few people in class, and I had the reputation of being somebody who did well. So I know that it sounds a bit immodest, but yes, I was amongst the top 2, 3, 4, 5 people in my class of about 100 odd people.
Was there expectation from mom or dad that you kind of have to do well, or you have to top? And were there subjects that you were fond of? And was dad or mom or sisters ever teaching you, helping with homework?
No.
No?
No. I would ask them for help, and sometimes they would help out, but very sporadically. Interestingly, my Hindi was very bad, and so I asked my dad to teach me, and he was hopeless. He got his editor to come and teach me for a while, but that didn't help either. But no, I think the good thing was that my parents focused on the effort. So they were concerned that I should be working hard. I remember 2 things. I remember my mom saying that your sisters used to study, I don't know, 10 hours a day, 5 hours a day. I don't remember now. And you don't study at all. So she would always compare me to my sisters on the effort I was making. But frankly, they never really cared about what marks I got or what rank I got, or,
They didn't.
They didn't. They kind of looked at my performance, and I don't think they were over the moon either. They were not complimentary or anything, but they were like, they wouldn't focus too much on the report card. And of course, my report card wasn't bad, but they could have said, why are you not coming first? Or why did you do badly this semester, this time around? We used to have midterms and so on.
Yeah.
But I don't remember them having been focused on the outcome, but they were very focused on the effort. My father had a very different method. So my mother would keep badgering me, but my father then she would often tell my dad that, you should tell him, because, if you tell him, then he'll listen. You know how that happens in family.
Oh, yeah, of course.
So
the good cop, bad cop.
Yes. So he had a very interesting way of putting pressure on me. So he would say that, listen, times are getting tough, and we are not rich. So you'll have to fend for yourself. And to fend for yourself, you need a job that's going to pay you 10,000 rupees a month. And I still remember this, because that's how he used to say it, and it left a deep impression on me. So that was very effective. So somewhere I was like, oh my God, if I don't work hard and I don't get 10,000 rupees a month, then, I'll be poor and I'll have to live, in relatively less comfort and have hardship. And while he never said that I expect you to support me or anything like that, in my mind, it was like, what will I be able to do for my parents if I don't make that kind of money? So this was a different kind of pressure, but I have to confess that it was there and that strategy was working, though I never told him that. But that was at the back of my mind. And I remember that when I got my first job after IIT Kanpur, I don't know what it was paying me, but it was certainly paying me more than 10,000 rupees a month, which seemed a very large amount when I was in school. But now I was going to earn that money. And I was like, okay, I'm done. I've arrived. I've got my target achieved.
Yes. So the 10,000 was driving you. One question I had, Mom said, Mom was focused on effort, not on results. For our listeners, what is your view on that? Efforts or results? Or both?
I'm actually much more focused on results personally. And that's been perhaps a little bit of change in from a business perspective. Because I do think that the world is a harsh place. And in that case, I was already delivering a reasonably good result. So she could focus on the effort. But I have generally found that if people are not close to delivering a good result, if there's a big gap between what is expected of them and where they are, then you do need to start with that gap and then work backwards to the effort. Because sometimes, you're making a lot of effort, you're working really hard, you're bending over backwards, you're burning the candle at both ends. But if the results don't come, the world is a harsh place. And whether you are in the for-profit sector, the non-profit sector, or you're doing any role or job, people are going to discount you. So I think outcomes are important, unfortunately.
So results. So Pramath, you were doing reasonably well in school. Fast forward to us, what drove you to your next evolution? Tell our listeners about that. Why did you pick what you did?
Well, so there are too many twists and turns in my story. So I'm trying to make this simpler. But the first thing was that I got lucky and qualified for one of the IITs in India. And as you know,
for our listeners, you don't get lucky and qualify. And for our listeners who might be not aware, IITs, they say harder to get into than Harvard and MIT. And Pramath is being very, very modest. So please, sorry to interrupt. Please go ahead.
No, so I say I got lucky because honestly, I wasn't sure I had worked hard enough to make it. But I think I had worked smart, and that's what worked. I had focused on a few things and I got those right, which is why I was able to sneak in. But then what hit me was that I spent 4 years studying a subject I had no interest in.
Which was?
Which was metallurgical engineering. And I never did any metallurgy for the rest of my life, other than the fact that I got a chance to turn around one of India's big steel plants, where I had actually done my summer job many years later as a management consultant, and I got a kick out of that. But the truth is that the education system in India really does constrain you and straitjacket you and put you into silos. And so that I realized much later, and that was huge learning that has informed my journey in building educational institutions. But I was not happy given our earlier discussion. And so, and I felt
so those 4 years were not happy years for you.
No, they were happy from an extracurricular standpoint, but academically,
no.
I don't.
But then, why did you? For our listeners, would ask, why did you pick metallurgy, or did they pick you?
No, they picked me because I wanted to be at IIT Kanpur. It was the top IIT at that time.
Correct.
So it's like you get into MIT, but MIT says, no, I won't let you study computer science. You can only study economics.
Right.
And if you want to study computer science, then go to Carnegie Mellon. And I said, but I want to study at MIT. I got into MIT. I'm good enough to get into MIT. Why should I study? But this doesn't work that way in the US. In the US, if you get into MIT,
you can study what you want.
You can do what you want. You're good enough for MIT. You're not just good enough for computer science. So that's the difference in the system. So based on my rank, I could only study 3 or 4 remaining slots of subjects in IIT. I could not study computer science. I could not study electrical engineering. I could not study mechanical, chemical, civil, right? Those were for the higher rank. So from day one, they make you feel like you're not good enough, right? Because you have all these people ahead of you who are better, quote unquote. And then you get to choose between the few remaining areas, which in my case were, I don't know which ones more, but aeronautical engineering and metallurgical engineering. And those were the only 2. So if I wanted to be at Kanpur, which I wanted, I had to choose one. In fact, I chose aeronautical, but I was convinced by the counselors there that metallurgy had more opportunities than aeronautical.
Oh my gosh.
Even though I was really interested in, which kid would not be interested in flying planes, right? But
or
anyway,
space. Anyway.
Yeah, or space for that matter. So that's what I
Pramath,
studied.
just a quick question for our listeners. Has that system, does that still exist? Does that IIT still exist? That straight jacket?
That straight-jacketed system has become much worse. It exists not just in IIT, but it also exists now in the liberal arts system, in the humanities and social sciences. We just created a whole new exam. And in that exam, you have to choose, you are awarded, you do specify your preferences, but the computer basically looks at your rank in the exam and decides what you can get. Now, suppose you get into a top institution, they'll say, no, you can't study economics. You have to study sociology. But I don't want to study sociology, but I'm good enough for that institution. Well, if you want to study sociology, you go to economics, you go to another institution, which is not as good. But why should I go to that institution? So this system still exists. And it's, to my mind, it's draconian. But we won't get into that right now.
Yeah. Okay. So you had 4 years, which you didn't like the academics, but I'm sure you built some good friends.
Amazing friendships, very inspiring. And then the pivotal moment came when 2 of my professors actually changed my mind about academia and academics. And I was working on my senior thesis with them. And they were very impressed with the work I was doing. Interestingly, I was very happy when I was doing that work because it included computer programming. And computer programming was a course that I had been allowed to do as a metallurgical engineer, in which I had gotten an A, which I was very proud of. And because I did this programming thesis, which I was really excited by, I went and relearned all the concepts that I had done a really poor job because I was enjoying it so much. Again, going back to this happy concept. But like I told you, because of that computer programming, I got a computer software developer job very easily in those days. And it was going to pay me big bucks and bring me to the US as a programmer. And I would live in King of Prussia, have a car and an apartment. And, I had arrived. My father's goal was met. And that's when these 2 professors sat me down and said, you should study more. And I was like, are you nuts? I don't want to do anything to do with metallurgy. I don't want to be an engineer. I'm done. I have arrived. And they said, you're making a big mistake. You should study more. And they convinced me to go to the University of Pennsylvania and try out a different subject, but an adjacent area in mechanical engineering. And so I took on that challenge, went there, and my life changed again to UPenn. And then my life changed completely because there I realized I could study what I wanted. So I saw a course called Introduction to Computer Vision. I said, that sounds interesting. Computers can see? Wow. And the lady teaching this course was the head of the department, Regina Baichi, Czechoslovak woman, one of the first women in computer science. I didn't know that about her, but she was amazing in the classroom. And for 3 years, I pursued her to say, please let me do my PhD with you. And this is a guy who 6 months ago was fighting to not do more studies.
More studies.
To
But
now
you
say
did
that I want-
computer vision at that time. And it's
Right.
one of the hardest things right now
I
as we
know.
speak.
So I have a PhD in robotics under Regina,
Wow.
who is now
So she
90
allowed you to, accepted you as a PhD student.
Yeah, and
What
that
made
too,
what made her accept you for our listeners?
my persistence and tenacity. That's all.
So that matters, right?
That matters, and I didn't know that I had it in me.
Or you didn't?
I didn't. I just thought that I didn't. Because I never wanted anything that much till then, right? When I realized that I really wanted it, I would show up in her office. And one day she finally said, "Hey, I have a summer job. Will you come and do this with me? I've forgotten your name. Aren't you that Indian guy who keeps pestering me for putting your PhD with me?" She didn't even remember my name when I had been going to her for 3 years. But that's all history. The interesting thing, Sanjay, is that next week I'm going off on a vacation to Europe, and she's 91 years old, and she's coming with me to visit Prague and Bratislava, where she grew up. And I'm still in touch with her. But anyway,
wow,
that was an amazing journey being at Penn.
So that was an inflection point for you. Would you say that, Pramath?
Totally. And that has really influenced my work in education, because suddenly, from this straitjacketed environment, which says that because of your rank and because of your so-called intelligence, I will decide what you will study, to being in an environment where people are saying, oh, me tell you what to study, you tell us what you want to study. Imagine what happens when you are 22 years old and you suddenly see the shift. You are like, I was like a kid in a candy store, right? So I was taking introduction to robotics. I was taking introduction to computer vision. My friends were doing PhDs in philosophy, economics, American romantic literature, German literature, education. And I was hanging out with all these non-engineers, non-nerdy people working in linguistics and psychology. And it was amazing. And I think that contrast to what I had gone through my best undergrad years really shaped me, and has continued to be the essence of my journey has been this liberal arts, multidisciplinary, give students the choice, give them the power to decide what they should study, make them happy from the point of view of helping them find happiness, because that's when they will really shine. That's when they will deliver their best. And you are right, this actually applies to life and to work as well.
Yeah. But so you did your PhD. Then what happened, Pramath, if you can walk through, because I also want to come to your educational vision, which I think our listeners can see how your journey has been shaped, that you really are intent on changing, have changed, I shouldn't say, have changed and will change for the better, the education system for India, for 1.4 billion people. But so UPenn PhD can walk into any job, any place, especially robotics. I mean, my God, look at if you right now, robotics and Gen AI are two of the hottest things in this country. So anyway, so tell our listeners, so what happened? What did you do after that?
So Gulf War happened, recession in the United States happened, marriage happened, usual pressures of shit, where am I going to make money from?
10,000 rupees.
Yeah, so then I got a job at the University of Toronto. And the Canadians were recruiting heavily in the United States at that time, because there was a recession because of the Gulf War in the United States. And I needed a job. So I joined the University of Toronto. And honestly, I hated it.
Really?
Yeah, I hated being an academic. Studying to be an academic was amazing. And maybe I was in the wrong place at the wrong time. And I don't want to criticize U of T or the Canadian environment at that time, but this was, 30 years ago. And there was a lot of focus on your discipline. And I had no discipline. Robotics was not a discipline. I had done metallurgy, mechanical engineering PhD with an advisor in computer science. People couldn't figure me out. And then I would get these catty comments like, can you teach finite element methods? And I was like, yeah, you tell me what you want me to teach, I'll teach anything. But that was not the point. The point was, of course, I can teach finite element methods just because. So I found academia, again, very restricting in that milieu. I also feel maybe I wasn't cut out. Maybe I wasn't ever a guy who could just focus on one narrow area and get deep into it, which is what academia even today rewards. There is some interdisciplinarity and multidisciplinarity that has come in, but most academics and most academic departments, institutions have not been able to break the barriers between disciplines. And so I just felt like I was in the wrong profession. I was suffocated. So I was in a fix. I didn't know what to do. I thought I had failed. And I had taken a very bad judgment call. So I was in a bad place. I think that period was a very tough period for me personally and professionally. When again a miracle happened, and McKinsey and Company had started to recruit what they call non-MBAs.
Okay.
And they had a program called the Diversified Recruiting Program, where they were diversifying from just hiring MBAs to hiring non-MBAs, people who did not have MBAs. And they were heavily recruiting PhDs in the US. And so somebody referred me into the recruiting program, and I got the job. And that then again changed my life. That was a pivotal moment as well. Inflection point, like you said. I spent 13 years at McKinsey.
At McKinsey in the US?
No, I started in Toronto.
Okay, in Toronto.
I spent a few years in Toronto, but very soon, the year I joined McKinsey in the US was the year we opened an office in India.
Oh, okay.
So my joining McKinsey in North America coincided with the entry of McKinsey in India.
Wow.
And so I started coming to India for projects because I was willing to travel. And of course, I'm very deeply indebted to the leaders of the Toronto office at that time, who also encouraged me, right? They were very committed to your happiness. Remember the happy point?
That's true, yeah.
If you really want, they said, you really want to do this, we'll support you. So I started coming back. And again, I'm going to fast forward to 1997 when I decided to permanently move back to India with McKinsey and ended up spending almost another 10 years helping build the McKinsey practice in India.
Well, Pramath, how was consulting for you? You hated academics. You loved the PhD. I'm just trying to figure out, because you've done so many different things. How was because consulting is basically people. There's a joke that McKinsey gives people advice, leaves the book, and then they leave. How did you? I mean, obviously you thrived. You built the India practice, but when you look back, what was it about consulting you enjoyed?
So 2 or 3 things. I mean, consulting, for all the negative comments that people make, is ultimately also about problem solving.
Problem solving, yeah.
You have clients, and clients want to solve problem solving, want you to solve their problems. So what the PhD enabled me to do was to not be daunted by problems. and to go deep into a problem very quickly, which is what consulting requires. And to also do things in a distinctive manner.
Right.
Don't just do me too stuff, right? Always look for making your mark, making a difference, and so on. So I think that translated very well for me. I think what had also happened was that I, through my growing up years, going back to the Patna experience and so on, really had learned how to deal with people. And at UPenn, I was also a graduate fellow, which is like a resident advisor. So I had to develop a lot of EQ and people skills in managing young students and being like a big brother to them. So I think all those things had, unbeknownst to me, helped me develop the kind of people skills that people need in management, especially because in consulting, because you have to deal with clients. And you have to deal with people who are much older. I was the youngest in my family, so I'd always grown up around older people. You also have to deal with a lot of conflict because there's always this sometimes healthy but sometimes unhealthy tension between client and consultant. But consultant is coming in and telling you what to do, and they don't really have the experience so all those situations I was able to manage much better than some of my peers. And this Jesuit thing about helping people succeed is another big part of McKinsey's mission, right? So both on the problem solving and the impact for the client and helping people grow and dealing with clients well, I think helped me a lot as a consultant. And I really enjoyed it. I really found a happy marriage of my skills and my training. And, I was always an interdisciplinary person. In those days, consulting also required you to flip from one industry to another. It went from paper to media to steel to education. And so that was also a nice, happy place for me.
So fast forward to how did you, it seems improbable to our listeners, a McKinsey consultant is completely transforming India's education. How did that happen? Just if you can fast forward to that, Pramath.
So very quickly, on one McKinsey project, which was for the Prime Minister of Malaysia and the Malaysian government, we were looking to create a plan for Malaysia's economic growth, and we were creating a Vision 2020. This is in 1995, so a 5-year out, 25-year out vision. One of the things that we came upon was the idea to create new talent for the country, and talent that was based on technical digital skills. And so the idea was to build a university that would train people in computer science and in digital technologies. And so we created the idea of a new university called Multimedia University. And in a very common sense kind of thinking way, I was assigned the task of helping create that university because people said, this guy is a PhD, he had an academic background. Not that academia trains you to build university. But there the consulting sort of jibe is true that, without really any expertise, I was tasked to do this. So I learned what it took and I got into it, and we did create a new university which does exist in Malaysia. It's now almost 30 years old, called Multimedia University. While I was working on that project, Rajat Gupta, who had become the head of McKinsey globally, and had started to spend a lot of time in India, came up with this idea of building a new business school in India, and that McKinsey would support that idea and help build it pro bono. And when Rajat found out that I was already working on building a university, he roped me in to help with the Indian School of Business. Initially, I was reluctant because, I didn't want to work with a top honcho. The risks of doing curriculum mistakes are high, and I didn't want to take that risk. Also, I didn't have an MBA. So I said, listen, I don't know anything about management education, but he's a smart man. And he basically said, that's why you should do this, because I need somebody who will come in with a clean slate. So that led to the creation, my getting involved in ISB. Fortunately, ISB became very successful. Then people started talking to me about Ashoka. I was reluctant, but then I got attracted because the people involved were good friends. And then Ashoka took off. And then.
But were you still at McKinsey when you were doing this, all of this?
Yes, all of ISB was when I was at McKinsey.
Okay.
When I got involved in Ashoka, I had left McKinsey, but I had always had a full-time business career. So it was a kind of a side hustle.
Okay.
And both of these are purely volunteer,
of course,
efforts. But yes, I had left McKinsey by the time I started Ashoka.
And for our listeners, Ashoka is more a liberal arts education institution, right, Pramath?
Yeah, it's to make it very simple, we are like a US-based liberal arts university, which is multidisciplinary, but we don't have professional schools. We focused on a very strong undergraduate education, and we want to build a very strong research programs. Our benchmark is Princeton, and of course, this is not a copycat, but this is in the Indian context. So a lot of our content, our approach is very Indian, but we are trying to emulate and learn from the biggest, the best global universities, which are multidisciplinary. And so in terms of the characteristics of giving students choice, giving students the freedom to choose majors and minors and combined subjects, which is the interdisciplinarity, training people in the ability to think critically, write well, communicate well, are giving them a strong foundation and a core and a general education while specializing, so breadth and depth. All ideas that have been greatly part of my own journey, the stories I've told you about the contrast between the IIT and the UPenn, the McKinsey experience of and working with people from many different disciplines, not liking working in metallurgical engineering or in the job at U of T because it was too constraining. All of that has come to play in the creation of these institutions.
And then after Ashoka, because as I said, you basically embarked on transforming without probably having that big strategic plan, but you really have transformed education, and now you started Harappa.
Yes, so a lot of these, Harappa was an initiative which was to get into online and digital education. I feel that this mode of learning and education is here to stay. It's a big disruption. We don't quite realize it yet, but just as the textbook changed the future of education, I think learning online is going to change the future of education as well. And so I wanted to play in that space. And as you now know, with my robotics and my background, I've always been fascinated by technology, not superficially, but really deeply, because I feel that it can make a huge difference. So I wanted to understand how can technology really transform learning. And I sort of took the idea of using technology to teach difficult leadership skills, which I call thrive skills that help you thrive no matter what you've studied, which sector, what role, what function you are playing. And so people are more skeptical about whether those skills can be learned because they think that, you're either born with them, or even if they are learned, you can learn them on the job. But can you be taught those skills?
Can you be taught those skills, Pramath?
I think you can. I think you can't be taught those skills entirely, but at least you can be made aware that there are these skills. that you may have some of those skills and that you can practice and get better at those skills. And so that's what is the approach. And that, yes, you can use online techniques and tools to help to make people aware that this is indeed a skill. I can give you a small example. Nobody teaches you how to give feedback. We always give feedback. We could have a conversation after this to say, was I a good interviewee or not? Right? But you'll be stumped if I asked you that. But if I gave you a quick tip that, the best way to give somebody feedback, honestly, without making them feel good or bad, is to follow these 4 steps. You say, yeah, I would have given Pramath feedback anyway, but now that I'm going to get organized in this way, I'll be much more active, I'll be more fearless. Pramath will be less offended if I give him some tough feedback. And it's useful. So I think that that's the level of which interventions can be made. Ultimately, it's up to you to learn and practice. I can't force you to practice. But then nor can you force somebody to practice from an in-person classroom, right? We leave it to you to decide what you want. So anyway, not to get into the theory of the case too much. So Harappa was really about teaching what we call tribe skills online. And we've been able to do that reasonably successfully to be then acquired by upGrad in India for their business.
And now you're running, you're the president of upGrad.
No, so I'm just to be clear, there are many presidents in upGrad. I'm not running upGrad. I'm not the president of upGrad.
Okay, you are a president of upGrad, but truly have transformed education. Pramath, have a few questions that came in from our listeners. So I want to kind of ask you some of those, if it's okay with you. You've interacted with countless students, true, and entrepreneurs also in McKinsey, right? What common traits do you see? Just a few of them, if you can list that in those who succeed. Just a couple of them.
Yeah, so I think one of the things that you mentioned entrepreneurs, right? And I think it's true for people who are not entrepreneurs as well. They zero in on the problem that you're trying to solve very quickly and are constantly making sure that they're solving the right problem. I think a lot of people are solving the wrong problem and spending a lot of time on stuff that they are convinced that the solution will work, but it's almost like they're trying to find the right problem for a solution they have. And I think it's important to be able to constantly saying, what am I solving for? Is that indeed the problem? Or there's a different problem? And have I truly understood? And as you solve, you realize that the problem is actually something else. And similarly for entrepreneurship, what need are you meeting? What unsolved problem are you solving? Or are you just so fascinated by your idea that you're trying to justify it by saying there is a problem in the world which this meets the needs? So I think that's one thing that I think is very important, is being clear about what are you solving for. And that keeps changing as you go through, as you become more aware of the problem or the solution. I think the second thing that is so true, I feel, is that today you do have to be a people person. I think there are many examples of outliers or exceptions, but the exceptions prove the rule. And doesn't mean, people look at some of these iconic leaders who have really poor people skills or are complete, you never want to work with them, and they're very successful. So people point to them and say, well, if you're not like that, you won't be successful. But I also want to say that I think not all of us are like that. And those are not people who anybody, knowing who they were and how they behave, would want to work with. Ultimately, you have to be committed to other people's success in your team, in addition to meeting goals and outputs and targets and so on. And so combining your problem solving and goal seeking orientation with a commitment to improving people who work under you enabling their growth, making them successful, I think is a very important ingredient that I've seen, two ingredients that I've seen go hand in hand. And the last thing I'll say is a very high degree of self-awareness. Truly understanding what drives you, what are you good at, what are you not good at, being humble about your achievements, being open about your shortcomings. I think all of those come together very nicely if you're self-aware and authentic. I don't mean this to be for people to be soft or to be weak, but to just be themselves and not be someone else or be something else or be constantly comparing with others. I think it's important in the stressful world that we are today that you're comfortable with yourself first and foremost if you're going to make a difference to the world and to other people's lives.
So very important points for our listeners. One is focus in on the problem. That's number one. Strong people skills, taking care of people, encouraging people with you and making them successful. And then being self-aware of yourself, your strengths, your weaknesses, not weak, but just being aware of yourself is a thing. One quick thing, we have a lot of introverts in this world also. Everybody is not an extrovert, Pramath. A lot of our listeners are introverts. Can people skills be taught to people, you think?
Yes, I think so. I think everyone has the talent. I think you have to become aware of how to use those talents. By the way, I'm a deeply introverted person.
Really?
Yes.
Wow.
It doesn't come across this way,
no.
but I have to tell you that most people don't know the reality about me,
wow.
and I'm always behind, I think, a facade in many matters, right? And part of it is not because I'm trying to fool people. I do think I'm quite open, but there is a core of me which is very happy to be alone. I loved the pandemic. Sorry, it sounds the wrong thing to say, but from a point of view of being personally secluded, alone, not having to interact with the world, people don't believe this about me. Now, the reason I'm saying this is not to sound dramatic, but when I joined McKinsey, I was actually given the feedback that I should not come to meetings if I'm not going to speak. That is how quiet I was. I would come to meetings, I would take notes, I would go do my work, and my work was considered very good. I would get compliments for my work, but I would say nothing at meetings, either in terms of voicing an opinion or challenging somebody or asking questions. I just couldn't get myself to do it because one, I had all these insecurities that, I don't know anything about business. I'm a nerdy researcher who happened to get this job. Let me first learn, let me understand. All these guys are talking in language that I completely don't get. So I've gone through all that. And one of my managers took me aside and said, don't come to a meeting if you're not going to contribute. You have to ask a question, you have to make a comment, and you have to learn how to do this if you're not. And he kicked me into this. I was uncomfortable. I think it was hard if you hear what he said, the way he said. But it was meant well. And that changed me. And today, I don't speak much in meetings today either. But when I speak, I make it a point to have listened very carefully, to have formulated what I'm going to say. And I say it to make sure that I'm contributing to the discussion, or I'm challenging in a courteous and a constructive manner. And so I don't speak much. So introverted people can actually become very incisive, more incisive than the guys who talk a lot, but are not thinking. If you can just start to open up a little bit, your interventions will be far more powerful than people who talk a lot and who seem extroverted. So I absolutely can change and learn. And I've seen that happen to many people, and I'm a living example of that. In fact, now you can probably think that I'm talking too much, but that can happen to you over time.
So you can change, is what you're saying, and people can learn those skills. I think that's what Pramath is telling to our listeners is even if you're in terms of people skills, that's a very important point. Pramath, I think we'll need to get you back there because there's so much more I need to get to, but I also am cognizant about your sensitive about your time. So I'm going to just ask you very quick some final questions. If you can just respond briefly, keeping in mind your the timing, etc. When you look back to yourself, Pramath, let's say coming out of IIT, is there one or two things? What advice would you give? One or two pieces of advice you would give to your younger self?
I would say that I could have been bolder in my choices. I think I played it safe. I didn't try to get what I deserved. I was fairly subdued and I settled. And partly because I didn't see the possibility. So I think imagining possibilities and not settling, even though I learned that lesson, I think I didn't apply that too well during those days. I think I could have spent more time reading and learning about other things outside of my field. From an early age, I didn't realize the importance of that. There were some good courses at IIT and professors who were teaching non-engineering courses, and we took those courses, but I didn't take them seriously. And I think I would have done that. I think I could have learned a lot more academically by doing that than I did.
Been more bolder, maybe explored some more courses that would have helped.
Subjects beyond,
yeah. Pramath, just briefly, what's next for Dr. Pramath Raj Sinha when you look into the future?
I think just taking Ashoka and ISB to greater levels of excellence. That's really the big mission I'm on.
Yeah, that's a big, big mission. Awesome. Thank you for sharing your incredible journey, Pramath, your insights also, and your contribution to education and entrepreneurship are really inspiring. But before we wrap up, just a quick lightning round of questions, one-word answers. Pramath, what you prefer, books or podcasts?
Books.
Are you a morning person or a night owl?
Morning.
Chai or coffee?
Coffee.
Fiction or non-fiction?
Non-fiction increasingly.
Okay. Last one. Well, there's a couple of other ones, but and you kind of answered this. Traditional classroom or online learning?
Both.
Okay, good enough. Your definition of Indianness, Pramath?
There's a greater power than all of us. That power resides in each one of us. And your life's mission is to find that power in you and help others find that power in themselves.
Very beautifully said. Find the power that can help others. Pramath, who's been the one person, I think I know the answer, who's been the most influential in your journey so far?
I mean, I guess my dad.
Yeah, of course. I knew that. Okay, Pramath, I don't know if you've seen Nike's tagline is just do it. What would be Pramath's personal tagline?
Do it really well.
Yeah. And that's a pretty cool tagline. Thank you once again, Pramath, for being with us on the Indianness podcast. Your story is truly a testament to the impact that visionary leaders like you can have on a global scale. And to our listeners, thank you for tuning in. Remember, every journey is unique and every story has the power to inspire. Until next time, this is Sanjay Puri signing off from the Indianness podcast. Pramath, this was fabulous. We need to have you back because this is just part one, because your journey is truly, truly inspiring what you're doing for Indian education. So thank you from all of us from the global Indian diaspora for what you do. Thank you so much.
Thank you.